everyone, it's Silvia from Parcel Tarot. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to have a look at my favorite decks for Halloween. Okay, so there's a bit of a mix between Tarot and Oracle deck, and there's also a mix between indie and mass market decks, and I'm going to start with this one, which is the Stacey DeMarco's The Halloween Oracle, lifting the veil between the worlds every night. So imagine that. So this is a deck that was released by Blue Angel a few years ago. But I think that ever since then, I haven't really seen any deck that does exactly the same thing. So this is a deck that actually embodies the spirit of Halloween in both the cute and creepy and the scary and creepy. In the sense, there's a couple of cards in here that are definitely scary, but there's also a couple of cards that do remind you of the spirit of laughter during Halloween. There's a lot of skulls, and I have to say that ever since then, I noticed that there's been a lot of decks with, how should I say this, using the stock images for skulls and bones and stuff like that. And so but this one was the very first one that was actually doing that, or at least that I know of. And I don't know whether because it was the first one, I actually am more keen on forgiving the creator for just using stock images. And truth be told, they're not all stock images. Many of these are stock images, but not all of them. And I suppose that when there's enough of the creator's touch, you know, the creator's intention, and when they took this skull, which is a stock image, but then they worked on it, they I don't know, they used some digital manipulation in reproducing perhaps other elements that are in the skull right now, then it's kind of okay. It makes it okay, or at least it makes it okay for me. And undoubtedly, I have a passion for skulls, so obviously I have the tendency to be more lenient towards stock images that use skulls. But I have heard in the tarot community that we're kind of getting tired of you know, using skulls from stock images, and it's always the same skull. And truth be told, I do know that it's because all of the skulls here have a different kind of they have different names, but they all belong to the same. There you go. So it's obviously the same skull, and you can find it here as well, but they have all different kind of connotations to them. So this is the skull of darkness, and we've seen other skulls here that had different names. So this is the underworld, for example, or this is the skull of light. So somehow it still makes sense that we're seeing the same image, the same skull with this hole. It's almost as if I would remember all of the episodes of CSI or Criminal Minds in which they look at the skull to determine the cause of death, and they're like, it's blunt force trauma to the skull. And then they're trying and find out what the weapon, the murder weapon was. And I mean, you never get tired, or at least I never get tired of all of these shows. But as I was saying, it doesn't bother me at all, but I do know that there's a lot of people saying, you know, they could have at least chosen a different stock image for different skulls, etc. I don't really mind, but once you see that, you cannot really unsee it. I don't know if I'm explaining myself, and I do tend to see them more and more often. I don't really mind that. This is a really gorgeous deck. I actually really like the fact that we look across different cultures when it comes to the symbology that we tend to associate Halloween. And I, for one, I did not grow up in a culture that was looking or celebrating Halloween, because in Italy, Halloween, they started celebrating that probably 10-15 years ago. But when I was born, the fact of wearing a costume was only during the time of Carnival, and Carnival is huge in Italy, obviously, especially because being born in the region around Venice, for me, it was even more of an identification of a symbol of wearing a costume. So this is more obviously related to the American culture, but at the same time, I feel like it's been spreading so much that even here in Australia, for example, this year, we have more and more shops that have a section dedicated to Halloween decoration. It's really, really beautiful. And so I know that this deck is one of the first ones that have been published with that intent. And I really like it. And by the way, I'm just going to show you my nails. So this is the third week of October, and I am wearing this set of nails. So I really like them because they remind me even more of Halloween than other nails that I've been wearing before. So we got the jack-o'-lantern here, we got the mummy here, we got the haunted house here, we got the scratches and the wounds, and we got another haunted mansion on the little finger. So it's actually really cool. I, however, will have to remove these nails immediately after filming the video because they are so long. I don't think it shows how long these are, and it's actually rather difficult to do your daily chores with these nails on. But in any case, so these are the bags, and as always, they're kind of cute and creepy and cute and scary, as I was saying, at the same time, which I really like in this deck because I find it very balanced. Other decks in this video are not going to be as balanced as this one. Some of them will be just creepy, some of them will be just fun. But let's see what I've got. Another deck I associate with Halloween because of the vibes, even though it doesn't have the word Halloween on the title, is the Bonfire Tarot by Bybee and West. This is the one and only. This is the indie edition, and it's the very first edition of this deck. This deck has since then been picked up mass market, and you can still find it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or your metaphysical bookstore. I have to say though, I have two editions of this deck. So the indie edition, which was on the original, I believe it's a matte cardstock, and I also have the glossy cardstock, which is the first edition of the mass market deck, and I actually do prefer that version, or rather, if I have to put them in order, I will go first with the matte edition because obviously it's the one as it was conceived by Bybee. And I have to say, I absolutely love the fact that I've got this original little white book, because I remember reading that she literally just photocopied that in her with her printer back at home, and it was handwritten and everything, and it does make you feel like you're even closer to the creator when you can see something that you know as a fact that she literally just handmade. So it is kind of cute and cool at the same time to have this. This one, yes, as I said, it is my favorite edition. However, I do know that I keep the glossy one, and I believe the latest edition of this deck is actually on a linen cardstock, and with a few variations on the colors, perhaps also on the images. I don't have that one, so I cannot corroborate that. But I absolutely love this one because of the colors. And this is bringing me as close as I can get to the traditions of Halloween and the All Hallows Eve of the month of October in New Orleans as I can, because obviously, the use of the colors, it does remind me of the celebrations in Halloween and all of the effigies that you can see at that time of the year, at this time of the year, in that wonderful place. I have been to New Orleans, unfortunately not during Halloween season, which would have been absolutely fantastic, and perhaps one day I will go. But you can see it's something related to a celebration of the passing, obviously. And I have to say, I was lucky enough to witness a funeral, a traditional marching band, going through the streets of the city, especially in the Latin Quarter and the French Quarter. And it was just absolutely fantastic because you can really feel the celebration in the atmosphere, in the music. Even though obviously it is a sad occasion, but at the same time it is presented to you as if it was something to indeed celebrate and be happy about, or at least everyone being together to celebrate the life rather than the passing of the person. And so this is indeed something that comes out of these cards for me, even though Bybee lives in New South Wales. As a matter of fact, she lives only a few hundred kilometers north from where I live. And in many cases, so if you have, for example, the Word of Sarah Howard, you will know that that deck is based on the lake area. Where Bybee is based, and I've been to that lake area several times, and I can really feel the vibes of the Word of Sarah Howard oracle. But this is my Halloween deck, and it's my New Orleans deck. I don't know if you agree with me. Let me know in the comments below. This is a fantastic deck in any case, and I really love using this. It is a very fiery deck. Obviously, it is called the Bonfire Tarot, but you know, it's just really coming out of the cards. There is this spark of energy that it doesn't even seem to have any kind of expiry date. It just goes on burning forever, and it's absolutely fantastic. Another deck that I associate with Halloween is the Tarot of the Unknown. This is the pocket edition, I would say, or mini edition pocket form. So this is, I don't know if you're familiar with this deck. This is the Tarot of the Unknown, and it's based on the series Over the Garden Wall. Now, if you never watched Over the Garden Wall, I highly recommend it. All of the characters are inspired, but literally based on that. And it actually is really beautiful because it does follow the RWS system, so it's not, let's say, difficult to read with, but at the same time it does have the same kind of atmosphere because of the characters. And I have to say, in here there's also a little bit of an explanation about Chris Smith, which is the artist behind this deck, and it does talk about, so this is from, it says here 2019, the outpouring of kind words and love has been overwhelming since the first collector's edition printing hit Kickstarter in 2019. So this is not actually from 2019. It has been released later than that, but you do have a bit of a, it's almost as if this was a little white book, because it does tell you a bit of how to interpret the cards with a few keywords. But what I love about this deck, one of the many things that I love about this deck, is also the backs of the cards, because obviously we got the jack-o'-lantern here, we got the skulls, we got the black cats and everything else, which is usually associated with Halloween symbols. It is gilded, really nice gilding, as I say, and it is a as I said, you will, if you're familiar with Over the Garden Walls, you will recognize the characters. And I have to say, when we're looking at the majors, there are renaming. So obviously, either you look back at the explanation cards that I showed earlier, or if you know your stuff, if you know how to read tarot and you automatically know how to associate the numbers with the traditional names of the majors, then it won't be a problem. But for example, the Hierophant here is called Adelaide the Hierophant. Well, mind you, it does say Hierophant here, so it's not difficult. Then you have the Lovers of Skulls. The Highwayman is the Hangman. It's not difficult to, make the comparison. Or Empress Marguerite, obviously the Empress. Justice card. The Beast is the Devil card, which is, again, it's not that difficult to make the association. But these cards are actually really beautiful. Lorna is the Death card, and you do see the symbology. The Rose, for example, Temperance card, the Knight of Cups, and so on. So as you can see, as I said, very much relatable to the RWS. Very easy to read with this deck. Very beautiful deck. I love the color palette and the fact that we have these kind of, almost as if all of the colors, the original colors, will pass through some kind of a sepia filter, because it does tend to have that, especially on the background, that you can see that. The Greg for the Fool, which is really cute. And so I really love using this deck. It's one of those decks that I use in my readings when I read for my clients this time of the year, and I'm actually gonna use this deck for my members readings. So it's gonna be so much fun. And I have to say, I don't even feel like paired it up with an oracle deck like I usually do. I feel that all of these decks, for example, with one or two exceptions, I actually use them by themselves on their own, because they have such a strong personality that it's, I don't know, it feels like it's actually really enough to be using them on their own. Another deck that I associate with Halloween is the Ghosts and Spirits Tarot by Lisa Hunt. This is a mass market deck, has been published by US Games a few years ago. It is I believe it's still in print, or at least I hope so, and it's a really beautiful deck. Now, Lisa Hunt's style is very recognizable, so if you have, for example, seen this deck or other decks by her, even the Pastoral Tarot, for example, but also the Fairy Tale Tarot, which it went out of print for a while and it was very difficult to find, and whomever was selling a copy, they were asking for really high prices, and I have to say it was easier to find the Spanish version of the deck, which I have got. I speak Spanish, so I didn't have any problem in reading the guidebook. However, I will definitely buy the new reprint of the English edition, because obviously it's just going to be easier to read about these stories. So the Fairy Tale Tarot is going to be reprinted soon. This one is fantastic. I think that for me it's actually a deck that I appreciate even more, because for each and every one of these images there is a story that is based on a legend of ghosts and or spirits. And I have to say, reading about these stories is an experience in and by itself. It really takes you down the rabbit hole of these really beautiful stories, beautiful and daunting at times. And obviously we're talking about ghosts and spirits, so obviously some of them are, let's say, a bit scary, as you can imagine. Some of them are a bit scary, but at the same time they have a really uplifting kind of ending, and so I always appreciate them. And I have to say, at the same time, it makes it easier to associate the story with the meaning of the card, or at least the image on the card with the meaning of the tarot card itself. Because ironically, this is one of the decks that I believe you really need to read the guidebook if you want to learn how to read with this. There's two ways, obviously, of approaching this deck. If you just want to stick to the meanings of the RWS, you can do that, but you will miss out on so much. And let me just give you an example, because I've got the Queen of Swords here. So I'm just going to go to the guidebook and go to the Queen of Swords. And I'm just going to show you what I mean, because, okay, it's at the beginning. So Queen of Swords, there you go. Banshee. So this is the Banshee. Banshee is a spirit of Celtic lore whose cries foreshadow death. She often warns family members of the sadness ahead with her penetrating wails. She would appear as either a beautiful maiden or an ugly old hag. The Banshee is one with the elements, and like the thunder that warns us of inclement weather ahead, the Banshee's cry is a harbinger of the changes to come. She is the messenger of truth and helps others prepare for the inevitable. Divinatory meaning, a strong female influence may provide a needed wake-up call. She is an effective communicator who will deliver the truth. And obviously this is really resonating with the RWS meaning of the Queen of Swords, but the fact that now we know that this is the representation of the Banshee, and we know a little bit of what the Banshee does, it really helps us get into the spirit of reading this card, this particular card, as you know, embodied by the way in which Lisa Hunt has created that image. So the death card is really beautiful, and I have to say I actually really love the aesthetics of this deck, even though it is a bit scary, but that's what you expect, and that's the reason why I do associate this with Halloween. The Ten of Cups is absolutely beautiful, and I have to say Halloween for me is also the time of the year in which you tell yourself scary stories, ghost stories, and therefore, you know, it's just one of those decks that you really want to use at this time of the year. And talking about telling each other stories and scary stories, another deck that I always associate with Halloween is the Dark Fairy Tale Tarot, because we're looking at all fairy tales, or at least inspired by fairy tales that have an element of darkness to them. And even though I have to say that most fairy tales are scary, and if you watched the Grimm TV show, which I absolutely loved, you will remember that so basically the Grimm is a TV show based on characters that you may find on the Brother Grimm's tales. I read the Brother Grimm's tales many years ago, and I have to say I really want to pick it back up, because I was just fascinated by the elements that you can find in that in those books, in those tales. And so whenever there's these characters that come out of the tales, it's very interesting to see how a creator of a tarot deck has associated those characters with the meanings of the cards. So this is obviously not just based on the Brother Grimm's tales, but it's dark fairy tales in general. And they are actually indeed really beautiful. It is one of the Los Carabao decks that has these, I don't know, unnecessarily large borders, which I'm not entirely happy with. And I probably should start thinking about trimming them down to the artwork, even though I have to say it might mean that I have to write down the number and the suit in order to be able to recognize which card I'm looking at, even though at the same time I'm thinking it's probably not necessary, because I mean, I would be able to see that this is the King of Pentacles. I would be able to see that this is the Queen of Pentacles. I don't know. I might think about it. I might look into it. Maybe I will just look around on social media to see if someone has done that already. This is a really dark deck, but as I said, sometimes we have to face the darkness when thinking about Halloween, and it's also a really beautiful deck. So it does remind me a lot of other decks that we know, like the Gothic Oracle, which I think that I have shown the Gothic Oracle. So let me just show you how the Gothic Oracle would pair up with the Dark Fairy Tale Tarot, because I'm improvising and I think that it's going to look quite nice. So I've got it here. So this is the Victoria Francis Gothic Oracle. In this case, I have a really old edition, so it doesn't actually say Gothic Oracle. It just says Victoria Francis Oracle cards. But I do believe that now you can find it with the name Gothic Oracle, and it's also by Los Carabao. So unfortunately, this one only has 36 cards, which is not what we want to see. But at the same time, it is really beautiful. And I have to say 36 cards. So if you take, for example, a tarot deck which has 78 cards and then you split it in two, you will have more or less the same height, also depending on how thick the cardstock is. But normally I would prefer at least 44 cards. That would be the perfect number for an oracle deck when I'm using them together with a tarot deck like this. So as you can see, we're looking at a very similar kind of style. It's a very similar kind of art style, but also when it comes to the color palette, the colors are very much the same. Or at least it's very easy to find similarities between these two decks. And I think that there is one thing that bothers me, even though I have to say, if this deck is still in my collection, it means that it doesn't bother me that much. It's because we don't really have keywords, we don't have keywords at all on the cards. And generally speaking, when I'm looking at an oracle deck, I kind of need to see the keyword, because that is the first way in which I approach it. It's the first point of entry, let's say, in reading the card. In this way, in this case, I have to focus on the image and let my intuition work. And sometimes, obviously, it works really well. I mean, I really love that sometimes you can also read directionality, because it does look like these two figures, these two characters in the decks have, you know, they're looking towards the right. So obviously this one is bringing my gaze onto the card that is here, which is obviously the Moon card, which is very beautiful, by the way. And I love associating that with the energy or the vibe of this card, which is reminding me of Venice, because this is Rialto bridge and this is a gondola, for example, and the main character here is holding one of the traditional masks that you can see during Carnival. This is Pierrot. So there is this sense of, let's say, communication between these two cards. But at the same time, it does take me a little bit longer, perhaps, to understand what the message is, indeed, because we don't have a keyword. I've seen someone putting down keywords on this deck, so going through the guidebook and then writing down the keyword here in silver, I think, in a silver Sharpie, and I think it might actually look really cool. So I might actually think about doing that. That would definitely be helpful. But I just wanted to show you how beautiful these two are. And there is this sense of telling each other a fairy tale or a scary fairy tale when looking at this combination. Now, the next deck I'm going to show you definitely makes me feel the Halloween vibes, but at the same time, it's neither an oracle nor a tarot deck. It's actually a writer's prompt kind of deck, or a storytelling card game, however you want to look at it. But it is the Hollowoods, and it's definitely, let's say, based on all around Halloween themes. This is one of those decks that I actually use sometimes, not as a plain, you know, a card game, but for the vibes that it has. It really makes me feel like we can build a story, as in when we are divining the card, when we are reading the cards in a for a client, for example. So we are definitely acting as if in that moment we are the storyteller. So this is definitely one of my storytelling decks, and the vibes are beautiful. There are no keywords because it really leaves all of the you know, the possibilities that you can get using your imagination. And I really love to create stories around these cards. Sometimes I just pull one, and during the month of October last year, actually, I pull a card, 2 cards every week out of this deck, and another one that I have that is very similar to this one, and I just wrote down whatever creatively came to my mind as a thought related to these cards. I have not done that this year, but it is definitely something that is it is triggering the imagination, because you have to come up with a story, even though there's a lot of elements, a lot of symbols in the cards, and at the same time there is a vibe, there is an atmosphere, but obviously it is something for you to be able to unlock and create. And so, for example, I remember creating a whole story about a dark fairy tale related to Cinderella. So Cinderella, that instead of losing her shoe, she actually loses the protection that she has coming from the cross that she was wearing, you know, around her neck. So she actually loses that before running away from something and entering the dark mansion or the haunted mansion. And so she doesn't even realize that she's lost the cross, and so she's not protected anymore. So it was a whole story about this dark fairy tale or dark retelling of Cinderella. And I have to say that lately there's a lot of retellings of dark fairy tales from the past. So I remember reading lately What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher, which is a retelling of Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher. So that was really interesting. And there's retellings of all stories. Even Alice in Wonderland has a dark retelling. And I normally would not have read that, but I love T. Kingfisher. She's absolutely hilarious, and I really love the way in which she portrays the characters, so I really, really like it. And so you've got all of these images that really help you get into that theme of the story, and they really get the creative juices going. So one of my favorite decks for Halloween is a deck that actually is centered around La Santa Muerte. So this is the Santa Muerte Tarot by Fabio Listrani, and I have good news. So Fabio Listrani has just released another deck which is called the Voodoo Tarot or the Spirit Box. I don't really know which is the main name, let's say, of that deck. It is also released by Los Carabeo, and unfortunately has not been, let's say, made available yet. I believe that Fabio was saying on his Instagram account that it would have been available around October, right in time for Halloween. However, I looked into all of the websites and I have to say it's not available. So in Australia, but we're always 3 to 6 months later than others, but in our case, we'll be able to grab a copy in February next year. But also in the Italian Amazon, for example, this has a release date of the 5th of January. Not this one, sorry, the Voodoo Tarot has a release date in January. In the American Amazon website, I think it's also after Christmas. So it's a pity because it would have been absolutely gorgeous. I had a look at a few of the images and I really love them, but I have to say this, I'm still really happy to have this because it's so gorgeous. And as I said many times before, I really love skulls and bones. I actually do read bones, so I do a lot of charm casting or bone throwing, which is something that I learned when I was very little, even without knowing what I was learning, because my auntie used to do that all the time. She used to read bones all the time, and I kind of, assimilated this kind of knowledge thanks to her. But I do love skulls, and this is all about skulls. And obviously there are some really beautiful, really daunting, but at the same harrowing and very heartbreaking cards, like the Two of Cups in this case. I love the fact that we see the skulls, these two skulls, reimagined as two cups, and the water is pouring from one cup to the other, from one skull to the other. So at the same time, there is this sense of fluidity of emotions, but it also reminds me of the airy vibes of, the brain. So moving the thoughts from one person to the other, sharing the same thoughts, and perhaps finishing each other's sentences, which is one of the signs that you're really in symphony with this person. I really love the way in which this card has been represented. And then we got the luchadores here, obviously, which is really cool. It refers to the Mexican luchadores. So it's lucha libre. It's like a form of wrestling, but it's got so much more than that. There is an enormous and very fascinating tradition behind this. I have been to Mexico a couple of times, and I was lucky enough to see one show, and it's really a show. It's absolutely very entertaining. I love the moon card, by the way, really beautiful. The way in which this character is looking through the mirror of the lake or the body of water she's standing above, and the image that is reflected. On the one hand, we have the moon and one face of the moon. On the other hand, we have the character herself, but she's a skeleton. I really love that. So this deck is very deep, and I have to say, when I started reading with this deck, I quickly realized that not all of the cards have a way to remind you of the RWS meaning of the card themselves. Obviously, when we're looking at the Six of Swords, this is rather easy to read, because there's obviously this sense of going, this sense of transition, this sense of moving along. But at the same time, this is not the easy trip. This is not the girl's trip. This is not the journey you willingly embarked upon. It's something that you had to do because you're moving from a place of conflict to a better shore. So this is something that really resonates with the RWS, but other cards don't have the same. And so I do recommend going through the guidebook and familiarize yourself with it, because it actually is really interesting as well. There was another card, I think it's the Eight of Cups, that I really love. And I don't know, and this is reminiscing of the Escher painting with all the staircases, which is really cool, and it's the tower, and it really does convey that sense of being lost perhaps and having to start again. which is really, really nice. The World card is absolutely amazing. But I wanted to show you, if I can find it, the Eight of Cups, because it's probably one of my favorite cards. Where, let me just go through the deck and see if I can find it. Also, this Five of Pentacles is really, really gorgeous, but at the same time you probably have to look at the guidebook and what the guidebook says about it, because it's not straightforward. If you're not used to it. The Six of Cups, really gorgeous as well. Okay, I probably already went through that Eight of Cups, so let me just find it. Okay, so this one here, this is the Eight of Cups, and I realize that it's rather dark, so I'm trying to put it closer to the lens for you to see. This is obviously the Eight of Cups expresses the leaving something behind because it's broken, and so having reached a point of no return in which you have to move on from something. Obviously, being the Suit of Cups is the Suit of Water, so we're looking at feelings. Perhaps there is this sense of being betrayed, being, in any case, heartbroken, and moving on. It's also liberating to a certain extent. There's a lot of representation in different decks of this card with the person actually going up and towards something positive. So ascension is always something positive, and they leave the cups behind, and the cups that they leave behind have spilled the content that they had, and so it's obviously pointing at something negative. There is this sense of spilling the water or the liquid that is inside of the cups here, and I absolutely love that the Eight Cups represent a crown. So there's I don't know if you can see that, but there's also flowers here, and the skeleton that is representing this character is actually scratching their chin, almost as if they were in doubt. They are doubting whether it is the right time to leave or not. And I, for one, I actually really, really love this interpretation of the card, because it gives me an additional layer of knowledge on how to read it. So this deck is still one of my favorites. As I said, I'm really looking forward to see what Fabio has done for the next deck. It's such a pity that it wasn't ready, or it wasn't released, let's say, for Halloween, because it would have been a fantastic deck. But even if it's coming in January, it's one of those decks that you can really appreciate year round, and I am really looking forward to it. And the next deck that I wanted to show you is not necessarily Halloween per se, and not based on Halloween themes. However, it is very much one of those decks that is creepy, but also kind of funny at the same time, and it's the Le Tarot de Marseille par Polka. So this is a Marseille deck, however the pips are really beautiful, and I have to say, it's, as you can see here, so this is the Devil card, and there's this sense of the umbilical cord that is shared by all of the characters on the card. So we're going to look at a lot of gory details, but also a lot of guts spilled in this card, so just brace yourself, because this is really creepy. But it is one of those, as I said, creepy decks that at the same time it makes you chuckle. I don't know if you know what I mean, but what I'll do, I will compare this one to another deck, which is not a Marseille deck, but it does tend to have peepish kind of minors, and it's very gory, but it's not a gory, creepy, funny. It's a gory, creepy, scary, and probably also a bit triggering. So we'll see, we'll look at it later. So as I said, this is a Marseille deck. It's really beautiful. The art style is absolutely fantastic, but at the same time, as you can see here, this is the Queen of Cups, and in the cup she's holding a cup full of, I think, guts or red worms, but I think it's most likely guts. So, and here again, the umbilical cord or the intestine, probably the intestine in this one as well. It is one of those decks. I really love the association of the colors. So this Bordeaux with the forest green. And so this is the Page of Pentacles, and is literally vomiting coins. So there's always this sense of puking and guts being spilled and stabbed, and you know, really scary. Every time that you have a cup, one card that belongs to the Suit of Cups, you have something really scary, like a head, a beheaded head in a cup, like this one. Or, you know, the wands show you guts spread along the branches. There's blood and gore. So this is a very peculiar kind of deck, and I have to say I don't necessarily read it. I don't use it for readings because, well, some cards are actually a bit too intense for me. So this one, especially when it comes to violence on animals, I react in a very, let's say it's not very pleasant for me. So that card is something that I don't like to pull on a reading. It will definitely throw me off when I would be using this one. And so for this reason and another couple of reasons, I don't use this deck for readings. Even when someone, and I have to say, no one has ever asked me to use this deck. But if someone would eventually ask me to use this deck for a reading for them, I would probably try and dissuade them. Not because I think that any kind of reading with this deck would be too negative or too dark or something, but it is one of those decks that, you know what I mean, it's very gory, very dark, but at the same time, you know, sometimes it's campy. And so I was talking about the word campy the other day when I was filming a different video, which I think it's already been published. So campy horror is the horror that it goes so far that it becomes ridiculous, and then as a consequence of that, our reaction is actually to chuckle, because it's the production of adrenaline, you're releasing it in your body, and it brings on a really strong charge, and you have to express it somewhat. And when you're not screaming because you're scared, then you're chuckling because you screamed before and you're chuckling at yourself, and so you're kind of embarrassed that you're being scared by something. So I don't know if that makes sense, but this deck is still on the campy side for me, whereas the next one that I'm going to show you has absolutely nothing funny about it. And you will probably know when you see it. It's this one here. It's the Cursed Auguries Tarot deck by Anna Sora. So there is something about this deck. This is an indie deck. It used to be available on Etsy. I think Anna has moved. That's what I heard. And she closed the Etsy shop for months because she was busy with the moving. I don't know though whether she's going to reopen the shop and reprint the deck or not. For now, I don't think it's available. This is one of those decks that I honestly had to convince myself to get it. And the reason was that it was a period of time in my life in which I was trying to face my fears. And there is one card in specific in this deck that is very triggering for me. Overall, I have to say, all of these cards are horrific. Don't get me wrong, I love this deck, but I'm saying the term horrific as in they induce the same reactions as an horror movie, for example, when I look at them. I mean, there's a lot. Obviously, this one is a Pippish Ten of Swords, is nails, rusted nails. It's not particularly horrific when you look at it, so I'm okay with it, but there are other cards that are much worse than that. And as I was saying, these are Pip. So all of the mimers are rather Pippish, as you can see. They are beautiful though, in the sense that there is a sense of, you know, relating an image to the cards themselves. This is the Wheel of Fortunes, and these are human teeth, obviously. So the sense of the card is obviously very dark, and at the same time very eloquent, because it talks about that. And for example, this one, this is a human heart for judgment, and there's this hand which is actually squeezing the heart so much that blood seeps through, and so we have this sense of being squeezed by the judgment card, which is really eloquent to me. It really speaks a lot. I don't know if I removed the card that I was talking about. There's a lot of spiders in this deck as well, and so you will understand what I'm talking about. So this is not one of those decks that makes you chuckle. It's one of those decks that makes you probably take a step away from it, like this card, for example. I don't really like myself touching a card where the image is a huge spider, because if this is an apple, the spider has to be huge. And this one, for example, here, which is the Ace of Swords, and I completely understand the sense of the card. So obviously this is the Ace of Swords. It's a nail that is piercing a finger, but at the same time is very gory for me. And there's other cards that I'm okay with. This one is very triggering as well. So I feel like, okay, I located that card. So this is the card that is under this one is very triggering. So if you are triggered by big spiders, I highly recommend skipping ahead of maybe 30 seconds because it is very triggering. It's always been triggering for me, but ironically, this is the reason why I actually bought this deck, because I wanted to face my fears. I do have arachnophobia, and I live in Australia, which is something that arachnophobia is triggered practically every day because we have a lot of spiders and some of the most venomous and deadly spiders in the world. And so obviously it's something that is not just in a movie. For me, it is in real life. I do have, for example, I have found a couple of times a redback inside the house. And, you know, it's something I have to deal with. Or, for example, huntsman spiders, when I used to live on the coast, on the sea, huntsmans were as big as my hand. And I'm not even kidding. So obviously it's something that you have to deal with. I have to deal with my arachnophobia. It's not like someone scared of flying and they only take a flight once a year. I have to deal with that. Not on a daily basis, thank goodness, but on a very regular basis. So please skip ahead. This is a very triggering card, but that's also the reason why I bought this deck. And as you can see here, this is a spider either coming out of the mouth of the person or maybe trying to close the mouth. I don't really understand. And it's the Hermit card. So obviously there's a whole different approach to this card. Is the spider coming out of the person? So, you know, we have to realize our darker selves. This is obviously referring to shadow work. Or is the spider trying to close the mouth of this person? Perhaps we have seen things about ourselves that need to stay hidden. Or perhaps it's a way in which we can liberate our core selves and come into the surface. I don't know, but in any case, this is very triggering for me. It's a very dark card, and it would never, I don't think I will ever look at any of these cards and chuckle. So this is the Devil card, and you know, I got a thing for eyes, so obviously looking at this card makes me very uncomfortable. So, and even this one, it's even worse. So I know that there'll be a lot of questions, as in, why do you even have this deck? Why do you keep it if it's so triggering? Well, it's the same reason why I want to watch a scary movie, because I want to see what my reactions will be. Can I survive that? I want to imagine myself in those circumstances and ask myself, will I be able to survive a haunted house, for example, or a slasher movie or anything else? Because we want to see, as human beings, we want to see whether we will be able to survive a situation that has happened to someone else. I think it's human nature to see whether we're good enough, and we want to confront ourselves with something that may happen. But in any case, you will see the difference between the Marseille Parpolka and the Cursed Auguries. Obviously, this is a Marseille deck. This is technically an RWS Pipish deck. But at the same time, we see how this one can actually make us chuckle, whereas this one is definitely not for the faint of heart. And to give you another example of a deck that is dark but at the same time funny, this is the Bohemian Gothic Tarot by the Baba Studio. This is an older edition. I think it's the 3rd edition. I also have the newest one, which was released a couple of years ago, or maybe a year and a half ago. This is by far my favorite because it doesn't have any cold press. How do you say that? Impression on the cards. So I actually do prefer this one. I know that they've come a long way from the Victoria Romantic 4th edition, which to me was a bit of unfortunately not a successful product, because the cold stamping in that edition made all the colors look like blob. And so there was no distinction in the details. For example, if it had been a cold stamping on this dress, you would have just seen a blob of red without seeing all the shading that, you know, it indicates, for example, the folds on the dress, or in this case even here. So I do prefer this one, even though I have to say that there is a blue tint to this deck that is not as remarkable in the newer edition. So probably if I could have a mix or in between this one and the newer one, it would be my perfect Bohemian Gothic edition. I'm not complaining though, I love both of them. And I have to say, this is another example of the campy kind of horror that I was talking about, because there are a few cards that are even breaking the fourth wall, looking at the reader and asking us to participate in this, almost as if they were winking at us and saying, look at me, look at how exaggerated and ridiculous I am. Or I may also be scary by the fact that in the Seven of Cups there is this character which is actually smiling. There's another card that has a more or less similar kind of vibe. So I really, really like this deck, and I have to say, even this one, for example, this to me is really campy because it's kind of ridiculous. And I have to say, it's a very good reader, even the Lovers card. It's a very good reader. It's one of those decks that really helps when you want to set the tone for a maybe a Halloween party or something like that. When you're reading tarot, they've been asking you as the official tarot reader to bring one of those decks. And this is one of those decks because it is at the same time creepy. Many of these cards are really creepy, but it's also kind of funny. And by the way, is this the Malleus Maleficarum? Yes. So it's the first time that I actually realized that the book that is held by this judge is the Malleus Maleficarum. So this is obviously referring back to the witch hunt. So the Malleus Maleficarum is a book written in Latin that identifies all the ways in which you can find out whether a woman is a witch or not. Obviously, it's a very painful reading. I had not the pleasure or displeasure of reading this book, but I did read some passages, and I have to say, okay, it is terrible. It is as terrible as it sounds. So if a woman had a mole on her body, that was called Satan's tit. So basically Satan was nursing through that mole out of that woman. I have a number of moles in my body, so I would have been killed immediately. I would have been identified as a witch like that. So I don't know, this book is really, really terrible. And, you know, the fact that it's the Justice card is kind of triggering. But it is one of those decks that really sets the mood for a Halloween party, and I really, really love it. And sometimes Halloween is all about hitting you square in the face with the truth, but saying that in such a way that you have to laugh. And I think that this literally summarizes what this deck is. So this is the Rainbow Brain Skull Oracle, and this is the deck that I'm using this month to read the energies of the week for my members. And I have to say, some of these messages really feel like a punch in the face, but it is one of those Halloween-ish kind of decks. It does have those kind of vibes, but I have to say the truth that this deck is telling you, it's just really out there. It's very provocative, it's very confronting, but at the same time it does so with some kind of, there is the sense that this deck is the custodian of truth, and so you can't really get mad at what the message is because you know that it's the truth. I don't know if you know what I mean. Okay, so it's okay, you're not supposed to be doing anything right now, or I'll never be perfect, so I'll leave it blank and let the earth slowly consume me. I mean, this is this message when, imagine yourself waking up in the morning and doing your daily card pull, and you pull this card and you go, well, that's it then. Okay, fine, thanks for that. Who cares if we become nothing? We were all once nothing. It's one of those decks that is very sardonic. It's one of those decks that is using irony against you. but at the same time, it's also winking at you because it knows that you cannot punish it. You cannot get mad. You just have to simply accept the message and just realize that it's true and moving on. So it is really, really, let's say, funny, but at the same time, you kind of smile through grit teeth. So you're like, yeah, I see what you're doing there. You're making fun of me. For me, if I can't make it fun, I'm just not gonna be able to do it. So this is really what the spirit of this deck is about. Still not failing enough. I mean, look at this card. So I love it, but at the same time, I'm also kind of upset with this deck for all of the messages that it's given me in the last few weeks. If you're not taking this deck with a bit of self-irony, you may actually get scorched by it. And last but not least, we have this deck by Pixel Occult. This is the Tacn Tarot, and it is the mini edition of it. You can also grab, I believe, in Pixel Occult's website, you can still find the full size available. I am very happy that I've got the mini. It's a linen edition because lately I have this passion for mini decks, so I'm really into them. But this is a deck that I believe this is poker size cards actually. It feels like they are, or maybe slightly smaller than poker size. But it is a black and white deck. And obviously, if you know Pixel Occult, so is also the creator of, what is it called? The Neo Moon Tarot, which is one of my favorite ones. And also the Lost Hollow, which is really gorgeous. And obviously the art style is very similar. You will definitely recognize it. This for me is a Halloween deck more than, for example, the Neo Moon, which is a cyberpunk essentially, and Lost Hollow, because many of these characters have this kind of let's say costume. They're wearing these kind of costumes, and so it does remind me of some kind of a really dark Halloween costume vibes. And I have to say, I really, really like it. I really appreciate this deck. I have been looking for the Lost Hollow 3rd edition, which is, I believe, with cream color borders. And I think that the latest edition has got Bordeaux color borders. So it actually is a really beautiful deck. This one that I know of, this is the only edition, as in it doesn't have necessarily different edition other than the sizes, different sizes. But I really, really like it. It is necessarily one of those decks that you need to know when to use a deck like this. You cannot generally use it just for a reading. If someone asks you for a general, let's say 2 weeks ahead kind of reading, this is not necessarily a deck that I will reach for because it does carry with it a kind of darker vibe. But at the same time, I really feel like this is a great deck to show others. So again, if you're the designated tarot reader at your next Halloween party and you have this deck, I highly recommend it, especially this smaller version because it's easier to carry. And it will definitely prompt a lot of discussion because of the images. And I really, really love this deck. So that was it for today, because I really wanted to show you some of my favorite decks that I bring out when I consider what decks to use during Halloween, the festivity, but also, you know, what I'm calling the Halloween month of October, the Spooktober, because I have decided to dedicate the whole month to this theme. So if you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps to grow my channel, and when I grow my channel, I can actually dedicate more time to producing more content. So you will be seeing even more videos. For now, have a great day.